Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of Bite Size Rallying, and this time we'll look at this, the Group B 400 horsepower, 4-wheel drive, normally aspirated, 3 litre V6 MG Metro 6R4 Group B rally supercar, campaigned through the very latter part of 1985 and through 1986 in the short-lived era of Group B supercar rallying. So, picture the scene. I want to say it's 1987-ish, and as a car-mad teenager, interested in all cars, ordinary cars pretty much, and always studying what cars I can see on the streets of Britain, I was a little bit perplexed as to why I used to see so many Austin Mini Metros. Why were so many of these things littering our streets? When it was a big question for me, when our public could be buying Vauxhall Novas, Peugeot 205s, Seat Ibizas, Renault 5s, Nissan Micras. But instead, for the reliability of the Micra, instead they chose, they chose this, the humble Mini Metro. And this car featured in the top 5 sales in Britain for well throughout the 1980s, and indeed the car in various guises, Rover, whatever, had an 18-year reign. People still buying Metros brand new in 1998. Just pause for a second just to think of that. Indeed. And to be honest, I blame 2 people principally for the success of the Metro. The first is Princess Diana. Now, if you think back, 1981, and the most unlikely thing happened. Prince Charles scored, and beleaguered Austin Rover, the PR department, pulled a masterstroke when they gave the Princess-to-be the keys of one of these shiny new Metros in 1981, and we all saw the shots, if we're old enough to remember, paparazzi snap Princess Diana getting out of the Metro on Oxford Street, locking the door of a shiny new W registration Mini Metro, and self-success was guaranteed from that moment on. So it was a masterstroke. The PR department obviously a lot more competent than the development, the engineering department, etc. So it was PR dynamite to get Princess Di to be behind the wheel of Metro, and sales success was guaranteed. And to be fair, in 1981, this substandard car probably wasn't that far off the pace of the other stuff. It was off the pace, but probably not that far off the pace. But in 1987, 88, the thing was still selling. 86, still well up there in the sales charts, outselling a Nova. And the other person I blame for that is this chap, Tony Pond. And if we think back to November 1985, it's RAC Rally Week, and the British press couldn't resist the mouth-watering prospect that Tony Pond, British driver, driving a British car, British team, British engineered, built at Cowley in the West Midlands, the mouth-watering prospect that the Metro, the mighty Metro, might just win the RAC Rally. And this is the era of 4-channel telly. TVM in the morning, when we're eating our cornflakes, we've got Mike Morrison, Richard Keys, Wincy Willis, Ann Diamond. And Mike Morris is telling us about the mighty Metros, and this was sponsored by TVAM. Then in the evening we've got Top Gear Rally Report, and then at the weekend we've got Grandstand with Mirror Walker. And the Metros all over the screens, and we've only got 3 other channels to watch. So people to tune in and watch these mighty Metros. And Pond, to be fair, did not disappoint. After throwing his Rover SD1 off from the opening corner, the opening stage of the 1984 RAC Rally, Tony learnt his lesson and drove a measured rally in 1985. And in the opening day, the end of the challenging spectator stage, where the RAC Rally could always be lost but never be won, Tony was handily placed inside the top 10. And as the rally went into the Forest of Dean and Wales and Scotland, etc., Tony mounted his attack on day 2. And it was the Peugeots, driven by world champion Timo Salonen, the Audi Quattros of Henry Mickle and Walter Rowe. They faltered. And Tony Pond in his Metro looked like he had a chance at victory, and he was battling with Henri Toivonen in the Lancia Delta S4, also making its debut, and teammate Mark Wellen in the same machine, in a similar machine. And ultimately, Tony led Henry for a while, he led Marky for a while, but ultimately he finished 3rd on that rally. but it certainly posted intention. The Metro was reliable and it had been on the pace, and it was a fantastic result. And the nation got behind the Metro, and it was quite realistic to expect that in 1986 the Metro had a real chance of World Championship Rally success when Austin Rover were doing a full programme. And being normal aspects, the car didn't suffer from the turbo lag that had hampered the Audi Quattro. So there was a real hot, very, very optimistic mood around the Metro for 86. 1986 Monte Carlo Rally, and Murray Walker was interviewing Tony Pond against the backdrop of the Eiffel Tower. Start of the Monte Carlo Rally. He's wearing his Pringle V-neck sweatshirt, grey with lime green diamonds. And he's talking about how he thinks the car will be in the frame has got a real chance of success. But unfortunately it wasn't to be. Tony crashed his Metro on a road section between the stages. And teammate Malcolm Wilson, he had transmission problems and retired. Sweden, the next round in February. And Malcolm looked on course for third place when the Metro failed again. Portugal, the ill-fated Rally of Portugal, all the worst teams withdrew after the tragic accident with Joaquim Santos. And we next saw Tony and Malcolm on the Corsican Rally in May, where again the Metro, Tony's Metro had issues, Malcolm Wilson's Metro set fire, Tony's had camshaft problems, Didiero's had oil pump problems, so the Metro was not proven particularly reliable. And Tony had lost his mojo by this point and had openly said he would intend to retire at the end of 1986. 1,000 Lakes Rally, Malcolm Wilson finished a lowly 10th, San Remo was 4th, the Persians were excluded. And we'll come to the RAC Rally in November, starting in Bath. And this really was the last chance for World Championship success for the mighty Metros. We had the computer vision cars driven by Pond, Malcolm Wilson and David Llewellyn. Jimmy McRae driving this Rothman 6R4 C749 LFM. Per Eklund in the Claren Car Audio vehicle, and a whole host of privateers. Ultimately, Pond didn't repeat his 1985 form. And it was only this man, Jimmy McRae, looked like he might stand a real chance of taking victory on the RAC Rally. And William Woolard of Top Gear actually did, I suppose, the question, could Jimmy McRae win the RAC? At that point, he was in contention. He was swapping times with the eventual winner, Timo Salonen, and runner-up, Marco Allen. But unfortunately, Jimmy's Metro was shod with Dunlop tyres, as you can see on the wheel axis here. And the Dunlop tyres let him down big time. In Grisdale Forest on day 3, I think it was, when Jimmy was well in contention and ready to mount an attack, the Dunlops kept puncturing and Jimmy finished a lowly 8th. Tony Pond finished 6th in the end, Per Eklund was 7th, Llewellyn was 9th, so the Metros rounded out the bottom half of the top 10. Not really what we wanted. And that was the end of the Metros World Championship career. In the British Championship, the car fared significantly better, and Jimmy McRae in this Rothmans car, and Llewellyn in the white 6R4 Beretta sponsored, drove blinders throughout 1986. On the opening round in Yorkshire, Jimmy got used to his new machine and, with a measured drive, took third place. Llewellyn, and this is a shot from the 86 National Breakdown, battled hard with Malcolm with Hannu Mikkelsen on the Audi Quattro, and ultimately Llewellyn overcut it in the middle of the night in Dalby Forest, spun and finished second to the former world champion Hannu Mikkelsen, the Audi Quattro. But it was a fantastic showing for the Metro and for these two drivers. On the circuit of Ireland Rally at Easter, Jimmy was the acknowledged master of the Irish Tarmac Classic, but in a nail-biting battle with Llewellyn, the youngster got the better of the Scotsman and Jimmy put the Metro off the road and made a rare mistake. Llewellyn came through to win the rally, which I think was the first international success for the Metro 6R4. Fast forward to Wales in May, and it was a tragic weekend when Hannu Taunonen lost his life in Corsica. But in the wet and rainy Welsh forests, the opposition was intense. We had Hannu Mikkelsen in the Audi Quattro, a regular winner of the Welsh Rally, Jimmy McRae in the Rothmans Metro, Llewellyn in the unliveried Metro, Stig Blomqvist, former world champion in the Ford RS200, and also teammate Mark Vaughan. And it was a real battle between these drivers. On the first day on the epic military ranges, Llewellyn overcooked it whilst in the lead and took the front spoiler off the Metro, but he was still in contention. Jimmy drove a measured drive and was well in touch. On the second day, Llewellyn rolled it in Llanafan Forest while I was spectating. Llewellyn rolled the Metro into a ball, and it was a terrible accident that really thwarted his confidence. And it was down to Jimmy to hold up the Metro fight, and he certainly did that in very fantastic form, and he battled violently with Blomqvist and Mikkel, the former world champions. And ultimately, Jimmy took second to Hannu after only 20 seconds behind after 2.5 days of intense competition. Blomqvist in the RS 200 put the car off the road trying to keep in touch, and this illustrated how competitive the Metro was, how world-class Jimmy was, and I think it was one of Jimmy's best drives, to be honest. Scottish Rally in June, and people thought that at last this was Jimmy McRae's chance to win his home event. He certainly had the machinery in 1986, but as regular viewers of this channel will be aware, Jimmy didn't win the 1986 Scottish Rally. The Metro failed him. In fact, the Scottish dust in June wiped out the whole Metro 6R4 contingent. Malcolm Wilson, Per Eklund, Jimmy McRae, Harry Taivanen, David, all the Metros. The Scottish dust got the better of them, and they all retired. And it was left to Mikael Sundström in the Peugeot to take victory from Mark Lovell in the Ford RS 200. On the fast-flowing Nadgerry tarmac lanes of Ulster in August, Jimmy McRae eventually had turned that promise he showed on every single event into victory. It took an emphatic victory on the Ulster Rally. Llewellyn tried to keep up and wrote the Metro off. Mark Lovell was a distant second in the Ford. Sundström, I think he was third in the Peugeot. But Jimmy took victory, and a victory that set him up to win his 4th British Championship title on the Isle of Man. Tony Pond entered the Isle of Man in the Company Division Metro, and Jimmy on the first day was battling hard with Tony, but ultimately resisted the temptation to do battle with Tony, let Tony run away and win the rally, which he subsequently did. Jimmy was comfortable in second place, he had the pace, and second place would be enough to lift another British title and a fantastic success for the Metro. Ultimately, it wasn't to be. On day 2, the cam belt failed, the Metro retired for mechanical failure again, and Jimmy McRae lost an almost certain British Championship title, and it was left to Mark Lovell to take the spoils without winning a single rally through consistency and reliability in the Ford. Jimmy took the Metro to 3rd place on the Rally El Corte Inglés in the Canary Islands earlier that year, and it showed real promise on the RAC Rally, which unfortunately didn't materialise. But the Metro 6R4 was a car that it should have been reliable. Austin Rover had been developing it for 2 years, but it was an Austin Rover. So that was a shame. The car certainly had the pace, the drivers had the talent, the concept was good, designed by Patrick Head of Williams F1 Engineering. The non-turbocharger route was a great idea. The short wheelbase, the car was competitive. And after the car was banned from Group B rallying at the end of '86, Austin Rover had lots of these Metros left over at the Cowley plant, and they detuned them to 300 horsepower to make them eligible for national championship events. They called them the Metro 6R4 Group B 300, and they sold them for £13,000, I believe. And many British privateers, well-heeled privateers, bought the cars, and I remember watching them on rallies like the Skip Brown Rally in the Quip Stage in 1987 and '88. You'd be stood in the wet, invariably wet forest of Britain, and 45 a minute before the Metro was due to come through, you could hear it, the sound of that 3-litre V6 reverberating through the trees, and then the Metro would come into sight with all these like wings and extensions, and the car was awesome, and it was a fantastic vehicle to see, and I really enjoyed watching the Metro 6R4. Just wish they'd been a bit more reliable, and Jimmy could have had that 4th British title, which ultimately the Ford gave him. So there you have it, Metro 6R4. Hope you enjoyed the video. No resemblance to Metro 1 litre City, but Metro 6R4, fantastic rally car. And remember, Austin Rover, now we're motoring. Adios.